This is Nolan, signing back on. Sorry for the pause. Things have been getting a little hectic, as it were. I'll try to cover it when I can, but for now, actions are still taking place. So, in the interim, time for another trip down memory lane. Louisiana. I want to say this was well within my second year with PEXU, nearing the 3-year mark. Time gets convoluted as a government-sponsored disposable. Dozens of missions a month, target packages the world can never see beginning to pile up in the back of my house, and my mind literally, as the weight of everything began to settle and press down onto my shoulders and soul. I can't tell you the amount of early morning or late nights, running off adrenaline and caffeine, marching off to every corner of the States and globe. 1 week in South Korea, the next headed to Canada to deal with something that came from northern Michigan. The next, well, let's just say something was lurking within the smoke of a large forest fire and harvesting all those who ventured in to stop the flames. Honestly, I think I was going insane. To be fair, I probably am, though functionally at the very least. Worst was every time I came home, it was feeling less and less safe. A good example was when I woke up one morning and decided to make myself a cup of coffee. Honestly, that was what probably did it. A bad omen. Anyways, it was heading into the fall of that year, so I could feel the cold of the Rockies seeping through the windows. I went out to take a look out on my porch, and I saw them. Birds. I live in an extremely rural area. Shit, with some of the installations I made on my house, I'm practically off the grid. Animals are to be expected. But not the nearly 200 dead birds I saw laying around the front of my house. All of them were backs to the soil, eyes wide and to the sky, wings and legs curled up like a wave of death hit them. I nearly dropped my coffee and backed in, holding my breath as the first thing that came to mind was some sort of pathogen and chemical agent. The Blackwood Brotherhood targeting PEXU operatives on their home turf, though minimal, was not uncommon. The unit sent some people out and analysis showed that there wasn't any sensible cause of death. Legitimately, it was like they just stopped, dropped, and died from what the shrink said. Is shrink the right word? Lab tag? Well, they're deep into animal science and forensics and… I'm rambling. Point is, it was damn near impossible to even see they were dead until necrosis set in. What's worse? I don't think it's the cult. Like I said in the previous entry, things have been weird around here. More handprints have been appearing around my property. Approximately 250 meters from my house is a wood line. Across the field, on an old oak that's got more rings than most countries got decades on this earth, was another handprint. This one was gaunt, elongated fingers that burned a good centimeter into the tree. Another one similarly appeared on my rain duct, like someone had attempted to climb it, though further inspection of the roof showed no more. I know what this was. The same thing the Mooch and the Taliban did, sizing up, probing for weaknesses. I went back inside and kept my rifle loaded. I wasn't going to blink first. I was almost overjoyed when I got the call from Montgomery about my next op, although I didn't know the madhouse I was walking into. You see, the things we're largely in combat with can't always just be shot. They're incomprehensible and primordial, and while we were regularly in the trenches against situation whiskeys, terrors in Appalachia, and fighting a conspiracy, sometimes we're up against things that warp the world itself. Dossier: Louisiana Umbra. Oh man, where do I begin with this one? Well, in short, I was being assigned to an area deep in central Louisiana, rich in voodoo and black magic. So much so that place is stained, and plenty of occult experts would tell you don't fuck around. I wasn't just fucking around. I was being told to rappel down and start kicking. Ever since Katrina, there's a large amount of backroads area in Louisiana that just haven't recovered. Infrastructure and basic necessities are constantly faltering. Quality of life is lower than some third world states. It's bad, and the town in question was more or less forgotten about by the local county. The town's population had been decreasing ever since reports of loved ones returning and wandering the streets started to occur. At first, it was a handful. Then, entire houses started turning up empty. The local police station was so undermanned, underfunded, under everything they were neglected. All signs pointed to something. Something had been harvesting these people. In an area where the veil between our realm and the other side thinned. Something had crawled its way onto our side, and it got passed to PEXU and assigned to me. Terrific. Worst part was that, in Montgomery's own words, "I wish we could provide you with more, but we're down on manning, and we can't confirm what the nature of the situation is. We'll have you on ISR every second. Call me if you need me." I can't say I was all too pleased to be going to a backroads swamp town nestled in Black Magic Alley that was slowly being devoured by something. I can't also say I had to front my own transportation on this one, meaning it was a crispy 20-hour drive. What I will say is, it gave me plenty of time to think about everything. My mind drifted back to the events that led me here. My time in 10th Mountain and the 4 deployments from hell. I think it was while passing through Oklahoma that I saw something that shook me to my core. It was this out in the literal middle of flatlands nowhere, past the native res, just a few clicks. I'm buying some fuel for the road when the cashier hands me back my change. Gold wristband, logo of the New Advent written on it. I spat the fuck out of there. This guy must not have left his zip code in the last 20 years. This place barely had a power line. And yet, there he was, wearing that wristband. So many people were. I saw a few at the airport when I flew out to Korea, Canada, even Germany. A pit grew in my stomach. The world we knew was slowly being consumed by something. Time was running out, and I feared the brass didn't have the manpower to stop it. I still don't. And I was right. Things got real weird when I had passed the state border into Louisiana. Groggy and tired, I pulled into a rest stop and caught some wings. The dream I had was weird, like vividly weird. I remember feeling shit in the dream, tasting stuff, the cold of my AC back at my house, my sheets, the disgusting taste in my mouth. I woke up in my own bed. Actually, I was sure the entire drive was the dream, a hallucination brought on by sleep deprivation. So much so when I glanced around, I felt the world come back. I remember rubbing my temples before I heard it. "Dwight?" A female voice. Someone I remember. She was an old friend of mine, colleague who helped me before I joined PEXU. Roseanne. I couldn't mistake that British accent anywhere, and it sounded real. The echo. Down the hall. I looked at the closed door, unable to talk. My lips wouldn't move. I tried to get up, but I couldn't. "Dwight?" She said again, no inflection in her voice. The warning signs were tripping. As the door just pushed open, there she was. Tan skin, dark hair hanging over a seat of white eyes with needle irises. I could feel my entire body panic as she sprinted towards me, eyes as gold as the New Advent's banners, face contorted into pure hatred. I snapped away so hard in the driver's seat of my RAV4, my chest hit the steering wheel, causing me to cringe. "Motherfucker," I said. Yeah, caffeine nightmares are a trip. Though honestly, I don't know. You ever forget someone's voice till you hear it again? So much has happened. I had forgotten Roseanne's tone until I heard it there. Hadn't thought about it in literal years. And something had drawn those memories back out. I looked at the clock. A hearty 30 minutes had elapsed since I went to sleep. Good enough, I suppose. Pulling into the area several hours later let me know the kind of shit I was getting into. Dense forests that were still cold and humid from the previous storms surrounded either side of the interstate like an impermeable wall. All along the way, there were overgrown shacks, rusted out cars, vehicles abandoned, some turned over, road signs hanging off wood poles that pointed towards roads that had long since been abandoned. Yup, this was central Louisiana alright. The town in question had seen better days, and that was at least somewhat alarming as it had been a while since the epicenter hit this place. And yet, power lines were still sheared and hanging. No sparks meant they were dead. Windows broken, entire sections of house walls falling off. People still walked the streets, off in the distance before disappearing behind corners. It was broad daylight, and yet seemed as dead as it would be in the pitch dark. You could almost see the slight dark mist hanging over it, a weird flicker at the edge of your eye. This wasn't inhabited by us anymore. Something else had made this its lair. First point of contact was the police station in town. And well, yeah, I'm just gonna go ahead and say it. I didn't even think it was the actual police station. It was a small 10 by 10 meter concrete square building on the corner, bordering a small lot full of gravel, rocks, and debris. Old bars had rusted over the smeared windows. The literal word police was painted above the door and had begun chipping off long ago. I pulled up to the curb, opening my door to get a blast of the wet cold, soon to turn into humidity. A hint of mildew and old rot in the air as I walked up. The only patrol vehicle had cracked windows, with almost all the tires flat and empty. Approaching the door, a single sign read, "Until further notice, all law enforcement responsibilities are to be directed to Louisiana State Police Troop." There was supposed to be someone here. At least, that's what I was given. I checked my info again and saw a code, 0432. I scanned around, and sure enough, a small lockbox I found hidden behind a bucket that I kicked away, causing it to roll down the sidewalk with a large echo. Inside, a set of keys and a laminated sheet with a set of addresses, and written on the bottom, "Good luck." Gee, thanks. I might be up shit's creek, but at least I've been given a fork. The first few addresses were situated in the center of town, something I thought would give me comfort. But I soon realized the extent of the harvest that had been conducted. Cars were either gone or abandoned, some parked half on the curb, others rotting in their driveways. Bushes and shrubs were overgrown. Sidewalks had more weeds than, well, sidewalk. This place had become a borderline project left to decay, the swamps having reclaimed it, as humanity had been driven out by something. I parked along the road, stepping out and concealed my Glock, though if I needed it, a short, quick, violent turn back to my RAV4 would provide me with heavier firepower. The keys provided were to select addresses, although I'm sure had the cops still been around, they might as well have given me a master key to the neighborhood and let me start looking. Regardless, I walked up to one of the single-floor houses, placing the key in and the lock wouldn't give. Too much rust. A single mule kick to the door. A few more months off my knees, and I was in. The smell of mildew hit me immediately, damn near suffocating. That air is lethal, so I brought along a simple rebreather to keep my lungs clear. Windows had been broken open like on so many houses, exposing the insides to the elements. Yet, there were signs that whomever had been here vanished. Sure, things were kicked around by either animals or the wind and rain, but the table set up for dinner that had long since rotten and fused to the plates, toys still on the floor, a lounge chair kicked up with the remote on the seat, the imprints of people burnt into the chairs, onto the table in the lazy boy. I've got a stomach for many things. Trudging through sewers with a pistol chassis and a light, looking for beasts? That's fine. Burn pits took my sense of smell anyways. The sound of a gunshot impacting a target? The screams? The blood? I'm infantry. I'm desensitized to that. Scraping people off a swamp-drenched seat, knowing they used to be a man, woman, child? Not gonna lie, I wasn't too prepared for that. But I guess I've hit a new milestone. Placed it into a collection bag, left the house and locked it behind me. Sample analysis from it read, dried flesh and sulfur. It was like this for several blocks, house after house, the same thing. Old homes turned into ruins, streets deserted. It felt more like a post-apocalypse than a silent one, but here I was rummaging through the aftermath like a scavenger. It was around the third house that I had left. No signs beyond silhouette imprints and rank smells. The shuffling of grass caused me to turn on a dime, hand sliding to my pistol grip, to see a dog. It was a Belgian Malinois. I know cause I worked with them a lot as military working dogs both in training and overseas. German Shepherds are terrifying, but they've got nothing on the absolute man-killer that these things are. Grey and black fur, built like a truck, yet its coat was messy and unkempt. It seemed hesitant, wary of me as I looked at it. I had an idea. Old bag of jerky I had seemed to bridge the gap, and I took a few minutes picking barbs and twigs out of its fur. An old worn red collar showed he'd been wandering these streets by himself for a while. The name read, Zeus, from the Hartwell family. My eyes turned to the house I had just exited. Har-we-el inscribed on the door side mailbox. Well, I said, scratching behind the beast's ear. By now, his spirits had picked up. You want to ride along with me for a bit? I was gonna place a towel down for the mal, as Zeus was still soaked in the outside swamp water and probably had ticks. But at this point, I had been wandering through mildew-infested houses, tracking stolen souls for hours, and I had just about enough. We pulled up to another house, more towards the southern edge of the town. As we did, Zeus started to growl. In hindsight, the capability a canine brings in terms of identifying threats I can't is something I should have invested in earlier. Keywords are, in hindsight. I took a step out of the vehicle, not wanting to drag the poor dog into plaster and wood mausoleums. I approached the house, which was just as unkempt as the others. Placing the lock into the door, it was pulled right open, causing me to stagger. The person on the other end was a woman, long blonde hair, hazel eyes, probably mid-20s. She raised an eyebrow and, in a southern Cajun drawl, asked, "Can I help you, sir?" I was a bit flabbergasted, looking around to the dead neighborhood, then back to her. I sort of didn't have a response, because to be honest, I had been sent under the pretense that the homes I was searching were empty. This one was not. I stammered a bit. She seemed annoyed, then smiled. "You're from the government, aren't you?" I scratched the back of my head. Yes, ma'am." She invited me in. I did my best to dry my boots off as the house was far more maintained on the inside. I noted this. Storms must have done a number to the town. She chuckled and didn't look back. "That's life here, mister. So tell me, what are you looking for exactly?" I took a look around, observing the inside of her house. Reconnaissance so far, trying to gauge what's going on. More than a gas leak. But gas leak is one of the official terms we use to play off events, preventing mass hysteria. It also draws out to see if anyone knows more. She did. Seemingly, gas leaks ain't caused those screams, honey. I raised an eyebrow, turning back to her. Screams? She nodded, standing by the sink in the kitchen, washing her dishes. It got the neighbors a few nights ago. Heard them and their little baby crying out. The ones adjacent, some down the block, like fireflies slowly going out, though you can hear every decibel. Her tone was chillingly gleeful describing this. I raised an eyebrow, my hand sliding under my jacket. "Did you reach out to anyone?" She shrugged, and I could see the flicker of a smile from behind her, standing a few meters away. "Things don't work like they do in Chicago, Dwight. Sometimes it's best to look the other way and keep going. If you survive, it wasn't your day." I then noticed the water she was using to wash the dishes was black, corrosive and dirty, borderline septic. The counter was also far more chipped and cracked than it had been. The walls were peeling. The carpet was mangled. Then, it hit me as my eyes locked on her and my hand gripped my pistol. "How do you know my name?" She turned, hair greasy and hanging over her face as her expression was blank. Her eyes were normal, but something behind them, an intention that was malicious, evil. Her lips peeled back to reveal sharpened and worn down teeth as she screamed, pushing the limits of her vocal cords as she lunged. I drew my Glock, and I was back in the driver's seat. My barrel clanged on the windshield as I found myself aiming with my hands over the steering wheel, where I had been exactly 7 minutes prior, door slightly ajar with my foot sticking out. Zeus had begun to bark like a maniac. First I thought it was me. Then I saw they were staring out the passenger window at the house. I looked. I couldn't see anything through the smeared windows, but I could tell it was still in there. This was a warning. Get out, or become a statistic. I wasn't backing down, but I needed more information. I took 5 in the parking lot of an old restaurant, a burger joint I'd passed on the way in, possibly the only one left. Zeus was gnawing away at a burger I had gotten him. I couldn't eat right now, nor was it ever good to have a full stomach. I learned later that it'd be the right decision. My radio was hooked up to the wave relay mount on the back of my RAV4, boosting the signal so I could reach PEXU main. Montgomery and I spoke as I half sat out the door.
You're saying it can manipulate reality?
The Brit spoke. I rubbed my temples, keying in the mic. I'm saying one moment I was in the house, about to be jumped. The next, I had gotten rewound 10 minutes back. A moment of silence passed as he responded.
Check your ATAC. I've updated you with contact information and a location for someone nearby who can help you. Originally, we were going to have you meet later, but we're pushing the timeline forward. This is growing out of control.
It was already out of control. Copy. November 1 out. The contact was... Okay, so you remember how I said Haitian voodoo and black magic was big in Louisiana? Especially around New Orleans? It was just my luck, or more his experience, that made him one of the last people still in town, alongside the diner worker, the gas station rep, but certainly not the landscapers. His hideout was one of those under the convenience store stairwell type spots, a small window with an LED sign that read, Jacques the Bone Lord. I looked back to my ATAC reader. The address pointed to here, coordinates and all, and the name was Jacques Delorme. I swear if Montgomery just fed me to some organ harvester. The door opened to see a man, late 60s, peeking through wearing a leather coat and jeans, a set of blue lens glasses concealing tired eyes. He looked to me, then to Zeus, then back to me. No animals. I shook my head. I'm not leaving them in the car. We already paid you. The tense stare was interrupted by the closing of the door and the sounds of several dozen locks being undone as he opened it fully. Doc stays on the corner mat. You go to the table, Jacques muttered. Where do I even begin with this place? Well, he wasn't called the Bone Lord for nothing. Skeleton parts seem to line or dot every piece of furniture, furnishing, and even make up a few shelves as the smell of incense in the dimly lit shop surrounded us. I leaned forward on the old round table, taking notes of all the calcium artifacts. These aren't real skeletons around us, right? I asked. Jacques sat back in his chair. Does it matter? Guess not, I said, sliding the sample from before with a printout of the details. You journeyed into those homes? He asked, realizing the situation with a surprised raise of the eyebrow. Yeah? I asked, though I should have been wiser to what he was meaning. Jacques flipped up his glass lenses and looked to me. I never ventured that far. Every time I tried to cross to see what had made this place taboo, it felt like a hand was clenching my throat. He said, gesturing towards his neck as he continued. Suffocating. I have been trapped here since. This place is no stranger to rifts. Something must have crawled out of one. Something? I asked, a confused raise of the eyebrow. Jacques shook his head. I have been looking into this since I could barely walk, and even then, I will still never even know 1% of the other side. Imagine a microbe attempting to learn about humanity. That is the depth of which we face, Nolan Dwight. So, I said, leaning back. What? We've got no idea of what this is or how to stop it? Jacques waved off the defeatist take and pulled out a map. If I were to guess, an Umbra. A what? A leech. Someone attempted to contact the other side. It latched on and pulled them in, used them as a line to cross through. Now it is free from its fast. It is growing fat on all those who surround it. Jacques laid out the map of the area and then drew a circle showing the extent, having now crossed far out of the borders. Did you experience any more of these? Warps? The not real parts in time? He asked. Once crossing in from Oklahoma, I said, remembering the rest stop. He stopped. A long swallow. We need to seal it away. I know where. I raised an eyebrow. He pointed to an old complex just northeast of the town. Old warehouse, previously used for lumber to carve into the swamps. You know the Trail of Tears? He asked. I was confused, but I nodded. One of the old routes ran through here. Many sick or wounded left to die. Others, later slaves, buried in the same cemetery. A whole lot of death, only wooden markers denoting their resting spots. Now, paved over and forgotten. Even that late abandoned. Jacques' retelling had his words grow more and more pained as he finished. So what? All of the deaths? I said, putting the pieces together. He laid it all out. Must have attracted something. I hear them every night, Nolan Dwight. Old generation and new, begging to be set free. I thought I was going crazy. They were ghosts. But you saw the aftermath. We need to end this. Please. He was trapped here, unable to leave as the threshold had surrounded his entire house. I wasn't as tied to the other side as him, no leashes to track me down. And it already showed it was afraid. If this Umbra was feasting off of all these people like they were batteries, I was going to have to go in there and undo it all. The route took me to a drop off the side of an interstate heading north from the town. I popped open the trunk and retrieved the essentials, pulling my plate carrier over my jacket, pulling on my belt and clipping the leg strap of my holster. The final touches was checking the light on my rifle and slamming the trunk shut. I stopped when I looked to the passenger seat. Zeus was barking, scratching at the door, practically said to leave him where it's safe. However, part of me didn't want to leave him here, and another wagered that, in some respect, he knew what was down that muddy and gravel-filled drop into the woods and wanted some payback of his own. I opened the door, and the Mal took off, forcing me to hoof it down to catch up. "Zeus! Zeus, for fuck's sake!" I called out, causing him to stop at the bottom as he stood firm, ears up and looking around. I stopped behind him as he hugged one of my legs. My rifle pointed into the brush. From the trees, they were looking at us, the disheveled, hunting forms of people just behind the bark bodies of the forest staring at us. They looked almost normal, but not quite. Some parts of them were blurred. Other parts I swore were intact were decayed. They were both dead and alive, stuck perpetually in whatever this weaponized hell for them was. My optics read reticle traced over them all, surrounding us as I took stock. They were sizing us up. We weren't relenting. The air grew stale, and the only sound to greet us was the sound of rain dropping off the trees. Then, one of them took off. My rifle took aim as I shouted, "Stop! Stop!" Though it was more of me doing my part as I fired. The round tore to them, and the thrall melted into the same decayed slop as before. Then all of them began to converge, sets of 2 to 3 shots as I switched from target to target. Zeus jumped onto one, a larger man, sinking their teeth into the neck and tearing them apart before they too melted into the same state. My rifle went dry, forcing me to draw my pistol. A couple of them reached out, silent screams as their jaws were wide. One slick motion, my barrel was level, and a set of rounds cracked off, and the nearby area was cleared empty. We had to move. Zeus and I took off down the trail, still being chased as I took aim, firing shots standing, braced against the tree, giving us some breathing room before we reached the clearing. I staggered out, Zeus sniffing the air as he growled. I messily reloaded a new magazine, the old one hitting the forest floor, as I slapped the bolt release home, aimed my rifle. The forest was quiet. The only sign of anything besides my firing on the trail was a hissing line of decay marks burning into the forest floor. Fuck's sakes, I muttered, topping off my Glock as I looked down to the Malinois before I quipped to Zeus, "I need to get a new career." The dog simply looked up, none the wiser to what I was saying. "Yeah, you're right. I should just shut up." I turned back to our target. A giant skeleton of rusted metal supports and sheet wall, standing just above the trees in the dense forest with cracked concrete and stone surrounding it. The warehouse. My rifle was raised as I approached, Zeus having taken some sort of roving circle around me as I made for one of the closer entrances. Moss and leaves hung above the cracks as water kept pouring down, a gigantic cracked concrete foundation floor with an empty shell of a building surrounding it. The old structure groaned and cried out as I looked up and around, seemingly nothing to greet us. Zeus, however, was too busy sniffing the ground, digging at the concrete as I turned asking, "What, smell something?" Jacques did say it was built over a mass grave. Only question was, how to get through several feet of old concrete. I lowered my rifle and measured my options, opening the phone mount on my carrier to switch open ATAC and see what assets I had available. Though I didn't like the idea of sitting there for several hours, waiting for a cutter or... "What you're looking for isn't here, Dwight." I was drawn out of my planning by a voice behind me, one that I knew very well though. It didn't click when I heard it, as instincts took over, and I turned and aimed my rifle. But what I saw, an old soldier and a friend, wearing dirty, outdated UCP digital fatigues. He stepped out from behind an old factory machine, still the same, like the last time I saw him, a decade and a half prior. High and tight, brown haircut, square jaw, shorter, stockier guy. His name tape read, Clancy. "What the fuck?" I asked, my barrel lowering out of shock. There he was in tan boots, a slight smile on his face, just like I remembered. As he took a step forward, my sense came back to me, as did Zeus's rabbit growling and barking. Clancy's face contorted to that of hatred and rage. That was enough to sober me up as I took aim at him. Clancy didn't like that. "Dwight, what the hell are you doing?" I shook my head. "You didn't make it out of Kandahar. I don't know what this is, but I'm not going to let you disgrace my fucking friend like this." It took another step forward. My thumb flipped my rifle to semi. The single sound caused it to pause. "I gave you a chance, Nolan." I shook my head. "Don't do this. Let him walk away and come fucking face me yourself." A moment of silence passed. I took a single shaky breath and fired. The firing pin hit the primer as the barrel sung and a round shot out. And he was gone. I was looking dead at him, and yet he was just gone. There wasn't a pile of decayed mess underneath. His body wasn't here. Another fucking illusion. Zeus ran forward, barking loud as I heard a single crack. Then another. Then the concrete gave out, crumbled. My stomach jumped straight up and grabbed onto my throat damn near as I went into total freefall. The light above grew more and more dim before I hit the ground, hard. A combination of rocks and dirt made me glad I wore side plates as I did what I could to brace myself. Zeus is barking from above, pulling me slowly out of my shock. As I staggered to my knee, I grabbed my rifle and turned on the light. I soon realized the sound I was hearing wasn't water falling, but melting. They were all there. Hundreds fused and melted together in some hideous form of old decaying flesh. 1,000 eyes and 100 mouths, all crying out as a grotesque form of several limbs all around a central mass stood in the darkness. There it was. The Umbra. "Fuck!" was the last thing I remember saying, before staggering back fast enough to avoid it as it lunged forward. One of its limbs had a dozen skeletal, rotten hands grabbing out, clutching and scratching at the dirt, as the sound of flesh falling off as their bones made contact with the stone filled my ears. I flicked my rifle onto auto, firing off a burst into it. Flesh and meat tore from its central body as all of them screamed loud enough to pierce my eardrums. Thank God for my ComTech headset. Then it moved, faster than it ever should have, as I leapt to get out of the way. However, one of the side limbs used its 1,000 hands to grab onto the back of my plate carrier, dragging me to it. The sensation of a dozen indentured, trapped lives being used to try and tear me apart made my spine crawl right out of my body. I fought to move forward, then got dragged into my ass as they all started to tear at my jacket and kit. Still, I fired into it, tearing off parts of the arm and body as I stomped fingers and palms, causing them to melt off as pools of rotten flesh. From above, I heard Zeus's roars getting louder. Remember when I said Malinois were crazy? I wasn't kidding. Those canines will leap through reinforced glass or smash through a fence to get to their target. I guess Zeus had the facto adopted me as his partner, or designated it the enemy, because he leapt onto the top and began to tear at its body. Oh boy did he tear. Skin flew as it writhed. I muzzle thumped my barrel into its body and fired. It retreated back so fast, Zeus fell off and onto the floor, although it did little to stop the dog, as he's proven he's built durable. It attempted to flee. I looked around at the mud and old concrete piled around us in this strange lair. It retreated further. Zeus barked, not backing down. "Get back here!" I shouted. I took off after it. I flicked my rifle's magazine out and slapped a new one in. Zeus was not far behind as I aimed my light and took shots at the form. As it fell apart, the voices started to get dimmer. I didn't know if that meant it was getting further, or if we were cutting off more parts of it. Suddenly, We were bathed by darkness, and I fell through a door, a literal door onto a carpet. I was back in one of the houses. I shot to my feet, seeing the layout of one of the homes I had cleared earlier. I looked around. Surrounding me as I sat on the couches, the chairs at the table were those taken. I remember this house exactly, as they were right where I analyzed their places. It was keeping them here, trapped. It wasn't going to trap me. I sprinted forward, towards the back door, Zeus nowhere to be seen as they took off after me. I kicked open the back door and jumped through. This time, I was in where I wager the police station was. The small gray square building had maybe 2 cells on the inside in stereotypical barred cage setups. 2 officers in the dark blue uniforms of local Louisiana cops sat up from their desks. I fired at one, only doing so because I knew this wasn't real. Full disclosure, I don't just shoot cops. As they dropped, melting through the desk and corroding it to cause it to collapse, the other laughed at me, gnashing their broken teeth. They grabbed my pistol, leaving me with one option. I reached for the epicenter of my plate carrier, drawing my benchmate knife and stabbing them through the bottom of their mouth into their brainstem. Kicking them off, I ran for the door to the outside and put my shoulder into it, then realized it opened inwards and swung it open as I sheathed my blade. What hit me was something I didn't expect. A blast of cool air nearly blinded me as I slid and fell, my ass hitting the dirt slopes of a mountain deep in the southeastern region of Afghanistan. I aimed my rifle as I could hear it. The sound being so vivid, I felt like I was 24 again. The distant pops, the rumbling, the high altitude smell. I was on an old road, I remembered. I took off forward, knowing the exact trail. I kept my footing careful as I didn't want to lose my step, or I would be taking a 3,000 feet trip down the fast ward. Instead, I rounded the corner to a cave entrance. Over a decade ago, it was an old operation post for the mooch we had the job for taking out. My first mission as a newly promoted squad leader. I remember staring into that black abyss just as I did now. I marched forward, and for the final time, found myself falling through darkness. Then, a set of teeth grabbing at my jacket sleeve as Zeus pulled me forward, dragging me from a drop-off into the cave onto an old set of stone tiles. I quickly tossed my rifle up as I grabbed the edge, pulling myself up. I took a moment to get my bearings, scratching behind his ear. "Thanks, bud." I used the stock of my rifle to push me back up to my feet as I scanned around with my light. An old mausoleum. The sound of tearing and wet splashes could be heard ahead as we both pushed forward. In the central room, with light shining from the morning sun coming through the bars, laid the torn body mass the Umbra inhabited. The remaining eyes in the fleshy mass looked to us, screaming out as I took aim and fired. The full auto burst punched straight through the center. As it attempted to reach for us, Zeus grabbed on and bit. Then I stomped down and fired at its arm, tearing it off. As my Malinois took great pleasure shaking the writhing limb to death, I reached into a dangler pouch on my plate carrier and dumped a bag of salt onto the thing. It crackled and hissed as I lit a match and set it alight. Jacques said he had a theory it was an Umbra. No way of telling for sure. When in doubt, salt and burn it out. I forced open the iron gate through generations worth of dirt and grass clumped up. Zeus took off as I dropped my Mac, loading a fresh one and firing into it. I slammed the gate shut as I grabbed at the bars and reached through, screaming more and more as it slowly melted into nothing but char. The last set of eyes met mine as I watched it die. No more souls would be trapped. No more people would be harvested. No more memories were getting replayed like some sick fucking remix. Fucking shit, I said, a glorious exhale as I walked away, replacing the burnt flesh rotting stench in my lungs with crisp forest air. Zeus followed. I set my rifle down on a tree, leaning back as the adrenaline started to wear off, and I could feel the freezing amount of sweat I had after the ordeal. It wasn't perfect. The area still smelled and felt like death, but the suffocating fog of dread had worn off. After a quick look around, November 1 to Maine, up for actual is Echo X-ray. Sometimes, you've gotta persevere, though let's just say, I'm in no mood to go back to Louisiana anytime soon. Regardless, it was probably the most vivid, as whatever it was, Umbra or not, made those blasts to the past straight out of the cerebral theater. It's not something I was looking forward to run it back at, and I told Montgomery as such. But he put it best.
We don't have the luxury of choice right now, when we're knee-deep in problems and burdened by short-handedness.
Though, hey, a few weeks after, Zeus acclimatized very well. What, you thought I was gonna leave him there? Absolutely not. No, that duck is the reason I'm still around, for better or for worse. So the least I could do was get him out of there. Turns out, yes, he did have fleas, a lot of them. Fumigation of my car and the cleanup was extremely nice, as you could imagine. However, he enjoys the open area of my property. Even more so in the following weeks, I'd end up taking him on several more missions. Whatever his senses are, he's able to point out a threat immediately. He's as much of an asset to the small unit I've got going as he is a friend. Though, well, some mornings I'll walk outside to grab my paper and bring him with me. Zeus will stare out into the fields with his ears pointed up, like he's seeing something. Then he'll growl. The first time he did this, I noticed the area was silent, just like it had been before. No day gets any easier. Out of the frying pan. You know the rest. I've gotta go. Got another target package rolling in now. One that I should be able to update you on, as we have caught up on some of the big stuff. For now, this is Dwight Nolan. I'll see you next time.